Hello, and thank you for joining us at Harvest of Hope. I am Minister Pedro Diaz, and for the last few weeks, we have been exploring the seven profound statements Jesus made about himself in the Gospel of John, each one offering a glimpse into who he truly is, and not through loud declarations, but through heartfelt truth. And today we come to a phrase that is often heard and sometimes overlooked but never lacking in power. It may sound familiar, but its meaning is anything but ordinary. Let's take a closer look. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. These words weren't spoken in front of a crowd or shouted from a hillside. They were whispered in a room full of anxious friends on the edge of losing the one they trusted most. The setting was quiet, but the meaning was worth shifting. Jesus doesn't begin with explanations or lay out a system to follow. He doesn't hand us a list of spiritual steps or offer a new moral framework. He speaks as one who isn't merely connected to truth. His words don't simply guide, they illuminate. He's not offering a spark, he is the light itself, steady and unchanging. He's not giving us something to hold on to. He's the breath that sustained, the source we didn't realize we were already depending on. When Jesus says, I am the way, he speaks into that quiet restlessness, the part of us that craves something solid, something lasting. Life often moves quickly, but not always with clarity. And some push forward, but still feel unanchored. Jesus doesn't point from a distance or shout from the sidelines. He meets us in the middle of the unknown, of the chaos, not with a plan to memorize, but with a presence that stays. And this isn't about arrival, it's about being held steady by the one who already walked where we stand now. Centuries ago, the scholar and priest Jerome translated the scriptures into the Latin Vulgate. He did so while living in a cave near Bethlehem, removed from distractions, devoted to understanding the sacred text. What he discovered wasn't just a record of beliefs, it was a living testimony of a person who walks, with the seeker. Jerome called Christ the road walked by the righteous, not because of its difficulty, but because of its certainty. And today's world offers a thousand paths to meaning, from curated success to spiritual neutrality. The modern heart is pulled in every direction. But none of those roads deal with the human condition at its root. Jesus doesn't adjust us, he remakes us. Then he says, I am the truth. In that moment, he's not engaging in a debate. He's anchoring reality. His words do not hang in midair, they land with a full weight. Truth in his voice is a set of bullet points. It's a consistent, whole, and unshakable. Jesus doesn't invite us to agree, he invites us to awaken. And the philosopher Immanuel Kant once said, all our knowledge begins with experience, but experience alone cannot hold up truth. Experience shifts, truth stands still. Jesus stands in that stillness and speaks with clarity to a world caught in distractions and contradictions. We have become accustomed to customizing everything, our playlist, our diets. We even compromise and customize our principles to fit whatever narrative is trending at the time. But truth doesn't bend to comfort, it reveals, corrects, and restores. And Jesus is not a messenger of that truth, he is the embodiment. Everything that is real finds its origin in him. And then comes the final phrase, I am the life. Not merely existence, not a heartbeat, not a set of functioning organs. When Jesus speaks of life, he means the inner vitality that comes from being reunited with what we were made for. His life is not granted in installments, it's given whole, and it renews everything it touches. There are people, today who breathe, but do not live. Their days are filled with noise, obligation, habits that never satisfy. Jesus' words reach into that emptiness, not with sentiment, but with power. This kind of life revives hope in the forgotten, and it stirs strength in those ready to give up. It sets the soul on fire in a way no worldly accomplishment can match. There was this Roman historian named Tacitus, that once wrote about how early Christians sang in their chains. The empire couldn't understand it. Men and women who were stripped of rights and reputation still carry within them a joy untouched by suffering. That joy wasn't emotion, brothers and sisters. It was life from a different realm. Life not rooted in safety, but in the unbreakable union with Christ. When Jesus spoke these words, he also said something that many avoid repeating. No one comes to the Father except through me. It's the tempting in our pluralistic, culture to soften that, to reinterpret, revise, or dilute it. But his statement doesn't apologize. It doesn't adjust. It calls. It draws a line not to exclude, but to clarify. And this isn't about pride. It's about a promise. He speaks as the one who alone can lift the weight of sin, who alone can reconcile what's been broken for generations. No philosophy has carried the cross. No movement has pierced the grave. Only Christ has done what no one else could, made a way for enemies of God to become sons and daughters of God. The idea that all roads lead to God is comforting, but it simply isn't truth. If it were, cavalry would be unnecessary and the resurrection a nice gesture. But history itself testified that something happened outside Jerusalem that changed everything. So where does this leave us? Not with a theory, but with a choice. We can continue building paths that loop back to disappointment, or we can take hold of the only hand that leads us home. We can chase partial truth that shifts like sand, or we can plant our lives in something that never cracks under pressure. Jesus' words are not a speech to be admired. They are a summons to follow, not later, not when you have all figured it out, but now. He calls us to move towards Him, with Him, in Him. And if you have been searching, wandering, or quietly drifting, this is your invitation. The road may be unfamiliar, but He walks it with you. The truth may be challenging, but it will never deceive you. And the life He offers doesn't fade, it multiplies. Thank you for listening. And as you continue forward, step by step, remember that when your word shakes, when the voice rises and shadows stretch, stand steady in what cannot fall. Stand firm in truth carved into eternity. Truth unshaken. God bless.